Good afternoon. This is Mitchell here back on my YouTube channel. It's Winter Storm Elsa here in Green Bay, Wisconsin. It's not going to change my excitement because my favorite time of year, March Madness, is here, and it's been such a long time since I've been on. Time just gets in essence, and I work 25 hours a week. It's still a lot to work seasonal at the stadium, so it's definitely been a lot, and I'm glad to be back, and I'm going to be out of retirement for quite a bit of the tournament, so this is going to be my real predictions. So starting off, so I'm really excited about it. So I help my mother-in-law with her bracket. So it's going to be, should be an exciting tournament. Could be a lot of upsets, but there's going to be a lot of chalk involved as a hint. So first we had the West region between, we had the East region between Duke and Siena. I will take Duke. Ohio State and TCU. Ohio State's been playing good recently. They kept it close against Michigan. They won against Iowa in the Big Ten tournaments. They had some up and rising players in that game, of what I heard. Ohio State, I'll take over TCU. St. John's with Rick Pitino's squad, I will take over Northern Iowa, even though Northern Iowa is a popular upset pick, a 12th seed over a 5. I would love to see Northern Iowa win, but I don't really see this year how they could encounter their 11th seed in 2016. They haven't been in this last decade, so that's going to be great to see what they can do, but I can't see them beating St. John's, and the Big East has been very weak, so they point that out there. The Big East has been really weak, and Northern Iowa beats them, and that would be a really crazy upset. Kevin Harlan's going to call that game too, so it would be good to see that on One Shiny Moments that Northern Iowa won. Kansas versus Cal Baptist, I will definitely take Kansas. Louisville over South Florida. That's a tough one because South Florida's been playing good in recent memory. They won their conference tournament. I know they're running into Louisville, but they're going to have a lot of momentum going into the NCAA tournament. And then Michigan State and Tom Izzo will beat North Dakota State. UCLA versus UCF. I will take UCLA because they're Big Ten up and rising. They made the semifinals in the Big Ten, and their point guard played really well on Saturday, even though they did not win. They beat Red Hot Purdue, but their point guard is a sensation for sure. UConn against Furman. Furman beat Virginia in one of the craziest 30 seconds you'll ever see in March Madness history. How crazy would it be if Furman did it again? But nope, don't have it happening. Dan Hurley and UConn and Alex Flanagan in the senior season will move on. Duke and Ohio State, I really could see Ohio State losing this one by only 5. I do predict Duke to move on with Cameron Boozer and company. St. John's and Kansas, I will take St. John's in the slight 5/4 upset because of how they're playing, and Kansas has been struggling in recent memory lately, which I'm okay with St. John's because Kansas has definitely done their share in many tournaments that we've been watching all these years later. Louisville and Michigan State, I will take Michigan State in a very close 6 versus 3 match. UCLA, UConn, I will take UConn to make the Sweet 16. Duke, St. John's. St. John's is going to be keeping the game, but Duke's going to win by double digits. Duke's going to make St. John's run out of the grass, and their perimeter and size of Cam Boozer, it's going to be too much for them. Michigan State and UConn, I will take UConn. And UConn and Duke will be a really big matchup. It's going to be in double overtime. Alex Flanagan versus Cam Boozer is what the families are going to be fed. I think it's going to be really close, and it's going to be an Iron Eagle game. Iron Eagle announcing game, and the A team will be at this region no matter if Duke moves on or not because of all the popular teams, Michigan State, UConn, etc., Kansas, and all those teams. So they'll be at this one no matter how Duke does because it's a very popular region and a tough region. But go back to the game, I really see Alex Flanagan and UConn. They've had a tough season, but they still got the number 2 seed, and they're very dangerous in the tournament. So I do see a double overtime Duke victory, a crazy Sunday afternoon matchup in that one. And that's probably going to be played in New York. So Duke will be in the Final Four. So next I will go to the South region, Florida versus Lehigh and Perryview A&M. Lehigh beat Duke a number of years ago. They probably haven't been in the tournament since 2012, but don't see it happening. Nice try. Florida will beat the winner of that one. Clemson, Iowa. I will take Iowa. Vandy versus McNeese State. McNeese State's another sleeper, but I gotta take Vanderbilt in that one. Nebraska, Troy, I will take Nebraska. They have never won the NCAA tournament before for any NCAA tournament game. So I hope as a Big Ten follower and a Big Ten nation that they can do it. And I have total belief that they can at least win one game out of it. I will take upset-minded VCU because North Carolina lost their best player. I think that's going to affect them a lot, even though it's going to be a very close 11-6 matchup. I don't really expect it to be any less besides a close game, but I got to take VCU because the point guard because North Carolina's best player being out, that's going to really affect them in the tournament. And then Illinois will beat Penn. St. Mary's will beat Texas A&M, and then Houston will beat Idaho. So we have Florida and Iowa. Iowa's going to keep it close, and their young squad and their young coach after Fran McCaffrey left, they're really going to keep it close. And Florida's the defending champ, so they're going to have a really, really tough road this year. But I will take Florida and make the Sweet 16. Vanderbilt and Nebraska, I will take Nebraska. VCU and Illinois, I have a slight 11 seed pulling out the upset, and VCU's looking to go to the Final Four for the first time since 2011, and I have them beating Illinois. And Illinois, I know under Brad Underwood, they've had some good regular seasons and a good Elite Eight run a couple of years ago, but I see VCU really being serious, and I think they're going to have a high-powered 2-3 zone offense, so I see VCU being a true sleeper, making the Sweet 16. St. Mary's Houston's also a really big 7-2 matchup this weekend if it ends up working out. But Houston will prevail, and they'll continue their run under head coach Kelvin Sampson. Florida, Nebraska, I see Nebraska's Cinderella run coming to an end. I can call it a Cinderella run because they never won a tournament game before. But unfortunately, Florida will win just like they beat Dairy Queen and Maryland in the Big Ten last year. So I see them knocking out the Big Ten again in the Sweet 16, and Florida will move on to the Elite Eight again. And VCU Cinderella run, unfortunately, will come to an end in that one. So Florida and Houston, the battle in the national championship rematch, I see it being very, very low scoring. It's going to be a lot of defense, and it's going to be one of the highest rated games to watch in the tournament if this ends up happening. But I will take Houston, and I will take Houston, and they definitely are due for revenge. So I will take Houston to make the national semifinals and meet up with Duke in Indianapolis. And then between Duke and Houston, Duke has too much perimeter, too much size. If they don't have any injury, they're definitely threats to win it again in Indianapolis. So I have Duke beating Houston in a very close another rematch from last season. So another rematch, Florida-Houston first, Duke-Houston secondly. So it's going to be that crazy of a tournament. So I got to go chalk with Duke to make the national championship, and we will go back later on my national championship prediction. Arizona will beat Long Island. Utah State will beat Villanova in a very close 8-9 matchup. 8-9 matchups are sometimes my favorite matchups to watch. Look at FAU when they made the Final Four as either an 8th or 9th seed a couple of years ago, and then we collected him, Dusty May, and we ended up upgrading our coach as a Michigan fan, which I've been very much liking what he's been doing lately. Wisconsin and High Point, I will take Wisconsin, and I can't really trust High Point to beat Wisconsin. Johnny Blackwell's been quite the player, and he's going to definitely be a lottery pick in the NBA if he stays another couple of years in the college. Whether he goes to the NIL or not, he's going to be a lottery player if he continues that. So they'll win the first one. And then John Calipari's Arkansas, who won the SEC tournament, will beat Hawaii in a close 13-4. BYU will beat the winner of NC State and Texas. Gonzaga over Kennesaw State. Missouri over Miami in the slight 10-7 upset. Purdue over the Queens of North Carolina. The Queens that never made the NCAA tournament until this year. Arizona and Utah State. That's a very, very close West Coast matchup, but I gotta see Arizona's gonna do it. And Arizona has a lot of high power this year, and they have a young coach, and they have a big squad in order to do it. And then they even won in the Sweet 16 over North Carolina a year or two ago. So I see a lot of good in Arizona to at least beat Utah State. In Wisconsin, Arkansas, Arkansas is the best point guard in the nation. He had 34 points in the SEC tournament yesterday, so I gotta at least take Arkansas to continue their NCAA tournament run as not a rematch in 2016, but they'll be their first Sweet 16 appearance since 2022. So on the 2016 will be the first time since 2022 they would make it in a tight affair versus the Badgers. Arkansas against Arizona. I will take Arizona. And then BYU and NC State and Texas. I will take BYU in a close 6 versus 11 matchup. Gonzaga versus Kennesaw State. I will take Gonzaga. Missouri will beat Miami. Purdue will beat the Queen. So excuse me on all that. I will go back to it. So Purdue. Missouri is going to keep it close, but Purdue is going to make the Sweet 16, and their player is very near their scoring record. He's only one shot away from making the scoring record after yesterday's win against Michigan. BYU Gonzaga, another West Coast matchup. I will take Gonzaga in a close one. And then Arizona, I will take over Arkansas in the Elite Eight. Gonzaga Purdue, I will take Purdue. And then their shooting guard, he's also a senior this year, and he was a part of the national championship team a couple of years ago. And I'm gonna go with a slight upset. Arizona will be defeated by Purdue, for Purdue to make it 200 miles away from the Final Four. 200 miles away from the Final Four to Lafayette. So that's a really big upset. It'll be in their backyard from West Lafayette to Indianapolis, but they will make it to Indianapolis with a rematch with Michigan as a hint. Michigan will beat Howard and UMBC. There's gonna be no UMBC upset this time, and they're not gonna know what to do with Adai Mara, who's one of the biggest upsized players in the country, like Zach Edey was. And then National Player of the Year, Yaxel Lindebord is gonna really be a squat this tournament. So that I gotta take Michigan in the first game. St. Louis over Georgia in a slight 9-8 upset, and St. Louis is showing a lot, and they were undefeated for a couple of games this year. So I gotta take St. Louis for the first one. Texas Tech, Alabama. Texas Tech will play Akron. I think Akron could keep it close, but Texas Tech will have too much for them. Alabama and Nate Oates will beat Hofstra. Alabama will beat Texas Tech. Michigan will beat St. Louis in a very, very close 9 versus 1 matchup. I see Michigan being a little bit too much over St. Mary's. Over St. Louis. I would be very afraid to play in either St. Louis or Georgia, in all honesty, as a fan. But if they beat either the 8-9 seed, they can at least make the Sweet 16 for the second year in a row. And then I had the winner of SMU Miami, Ohio, beating Tennessee. Rick Barnes has had some good tournaments. He's been in 33 straight tournaments, but they've been upset in the first round a couple times. They've been upset in the first round, second round. They were upset to Loyola Chicago in 2018, the second round. So I see that trend continuing for Miami, Ohio, or SMU to beat them. Virginia will beat Wright State out of the Horizon League. Santa Clara will beat Kentucky, and then Iowa State will beat Tennessee State. And then Texas Tech and Alabama, I will take Alabama. Miami of Ohio against Virginia, I will take Virginia. And Miami, Ohio, or SMU Cinderella run will come to an end, and Virginia is going to be too much for them in the SEC powerhouse. Santa Clara, Iowa State. I'm going with an upset. Santa Clara beat Gonzaga, and Gonzaga is going to be leading the WCC this year. And I think Santa Clara is going to make that. I think they're going to be a very deep surprise 10 seed. So I'm going to have Santa Clara go to the Sweet 16 with a date with Virginia. Michigan, Alabama. It's a really popular. It's a Rose Bowl rematch in basketball. I will take Michigan, Yaxel Lindebord to continue their red hot offense and win. Santa Clara will obviously get beat by Virginia, but in a very, very close 10 versus 3 matchup. So that would be a very underrated matchup, in all honesty. And then for a spot in the NCAA Final Four, for the first time since 2018, I will have Michigan make the Final Four, the first time in the Elite Eight since 2021. So the first time since 2018, Michigan will be in the Final Four in a Big Ten rematch against Purdue, the Big Ten championship rematch in the tournament. And then I see Purdue keeping it close, but Michigan's gonna figure them out. They're gonna figure them out in film, and Michigan will be a finalist in the national championship game of 2026. And then Duke will beat Houston. And then my teaser is correct. Duke will win it all against Michigan in the 1992 Fab 5 rematch. I hope you all enjoyed my video, and I'm also gonna do a coin flip tomorrow afternoon or tomorrow morning on on the heads and tails on random selection on which random teams I select, on which random teams make it or not make it. So imagine if a couple of them are right. Imagine if I have a couple heads and tails in the as a 16 seed being a 1 seed making the Sweet 16. So I'm gonna have a random coin flip bracket for the next one. So I'm looking forward to sharing that, and I hope you all enjoyed this one. I'm gonna be in a couple other free pools to have a few other upsets ahead. So hope you enjoyed this. Hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you all later. And happy March Madness week. Bye.